唔好辣親佢。呢邊。應該 OK 嘅。沖熱咗啲。
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated as the symposium is about to resume. As a reminder, please turn your electronic devices to silent mode during the symposium. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated as the symposium is about to resume. and gentlemen, welcome back. My name is Kiki Chu. I am the investigator of the ICAC. Thank you. We hope you all had a nice cup of coffee and are ready for our upcoming exciting events. In today's program, we will have 5 keynote speakers in the morning, followed by a plenary session in the afternoon. Simultaneous service to English is available on Channel 1 and for Putonghua on Channel 2. If you need any assistance, please feel free to approach our staff. To kick off our first keynote, it is my great pleasure to introduce the Honorable Chief Justice of Hong Kong Court of Final Appeal, Mr. Andrew Cheung Koi Nam. Chief Justice Cheung brings a wealth of experience from across the legal system. He obtained his legal education at the University of Hong Kong and Harvard Law School. He then spent a decade in the private sectors before embarking on a successful career in the judiciary. Chief Justice Cheung has served at various levels of the courts and chairs the commission that oversees judicial appointments. In 2021, he was appointed Chief Justice of Court of Final Appeal. He was later awarded the Grand Bohemia Medal in recognition of his leadership and dedication to upholding the rule of law in Hong Kong. Today, it is our privilege to have him share his insight on the topic, combating corruption and the rule of law. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Honorable Chief Justice Cheung.
Commissioner Wu, Deputy Director Fu, Deputy General Wali, Acting Secretary for Justice Cheung, Deputy Chief Prosecutor Clement, honors guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to address you all today. I would like to start by congratulating the Independent Commission Against Corruption on their golden anniversary. Founded in 1974, the ICAC investigates complaints of corruption offences and, beyond conducting anti-corruption operations, works on the prevention of corruption and raising public education and awareness about corruption. In these 50 years, it can be truly said that the ICAC has been the difference for Hong Kong, bringing an end to the systemic corruption that plagued Hong Kong's development in the 1960s and early 70s. Equally, if not more important than tackling such cases of blatant corruption, the ICAC has brought about a sea change in public attitudes in Hong Kong towards corruption. Whilst it was important for the ICAC to diligently weed out corruption case by case, for the long-term benefit of Hong Kong, the ICAC has played a significant role in tackling corruption at its roots. In particular, the ICAC has played a central role in public education to bring about a fundamental change in the values of society against corruption. Such is the success of this public education effort over the past decades that one can quite confidently say the type of systemic corruption in the pre-ICAC days I just mentioned is frankly unthinkable in Hong Kong in this day and age. In addition to the establishment of the ICAC, another significant component of Hong Kong's anti-corruption culture is the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance, which was first enacted in 1971 to make further and better provision for the prevention of bribery. That's the long title of the ordinance. That is, its stated purpose refers not merely to the prevention of bribery, but also to further and better provision for its prevention, speaks to the depth of determination at the time to weed out corruption from our society. Hong Kong's continued economic success is usually tied to the strength of its rule of law, with the rule of law serving as the cornerstone on which commerce and now financial services and the continued development of Hong Kong as a hub for dispute resolution and intellectual property, amongst others, are based. Without a culture of anti-corruption and values against accepting advantages, it is quite certain that there can be no rule of law. Combating corruption thus goes to the very core of what Hong Kong is and stands for. Corruption is insidious as it takes many forms. The more obvious forms one might think of include bribery, the use of improper gifts or favors for personal gain, embezzlement, by which someone with access to funds or assets illegally takes control of them, graft, by which public funds are misdirected for private gain, and blackmail, the use of threats and abuse of secrets to obtain personal gain. Corruption can occur on many different scales, from petty levels that may not even seem worth pursuing, all the way up to the systemic. Corruption can affect all areas of society, in both the private sector and the public sector. In order to address all these different forms of bribery, the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance is not limited in scope to bribes in monetary form only, but is extended to advantages, which include money, gifts, loans, contracts, services, and so on. The definition of advantage does not include entertainment, which is defined under the ordinance to mean the provision of food or drink for consumption on the occasion it is provided, and of any other entertainment connected with or provided at the same time as such provisions. For these purposes, it is worth noting that hospitality, such as tickets to performances or sporting events or hotel accommodations, are covered under advantages, not entertainment under the ordinance. Further, there is no minimum value or threshold for an advantage to qualify as a bribe under the ordinance. Here, it would be appropriate for me to mention some recent examples of how the anti-corruption and related laws in Hong Kong work in practice before the courts. The first I would like to mention arises out of the Court of Final Appeal case in HKSAR versus Chu An, a 2020 case, where the defendant gave private violin lessons and was asked by the parent of a student to help purchase a new violin. The defendant took the parent and student to an instrument shop, and on the recommendation of the defendant, they purchased a violin. Subsequently, the shop paid the defendant a commission, which the defendant did not disclose to the parent or student. The defendant was therefore charged with accepting an advantage as an agent under Section 9 of the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance. The issue the court had to deal with was what is the proper approach to who is an agent for the purposes of the corruption offense. The court finds that an agent is a person acting for another, having agreed to act in circumstances giving rise to a reasonable expectation and thus a duty to act honestly and in the interests of that other person to the exclusion of the agent's own interests. There's no need to prove any pre-existing legal relationship between the two sides, or even necessarily proving a request for the other person for the agents to act. the court decided that whilst a fiduciary duty often arises in similar circumstances, it is unnecessary to burden the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance with discussion of the law of fiduciaries or other areas of law. It is clear that the ordinance goes beyond ordinary principles of agency law. On the facts of the case, the court found that the conflict of interest was clear, as the evidence was that the lower the price of the violin sold, the smaller the commission was. Thus, the integrity of the relationship between the defendant, the violin teacher, and the parent of the student would be subverted. It was therefore unnecessary to prove a pre-existing legal relationship for the defendant to be treated as an agent, nor was it correct to focus on the fact that the purchase of the violin fell outside the scope of the contract for violin lessons. In addition to the broad approach to deciding who is an agent for the purposes of corruption, the court also found there's no requirement that someone such as the parent in this case suffered any economic loss. More importantly, the suggestion that the acceptance of an advantage in situations where commissions may be considered normal practice overlooks Section 19 of the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance, which states that it shall not be a defense to show that any such advantage as is mentioned in the ordinance is customary. In HKSAR versus Chang Wen-Kin, another 2020 case, the Court of Final Appeal had the opportunity to consider the meaning of the word corruptly under the Elections Corrupt and Illegal Conduct Ordinance. Here, the defendant had offered money to persons associated with certain political agendas to stand as candidates in district council elections. The court found that the positive objective of the ordinance is to ensure elections are conducted fairly, openly, and honestly, and the negative objective is to keep elections free from corrupt conduct and illegal conduct. Plainly, corrupt and illegal conduct is antithetical to fair, open, and honest elections. The ordinance therefore prohibits, amongst other things, corrupt conduct to bribe candidates or prospective candidates. The court held that the use of the word corruptly in regards to the offering of an advantage to a prospective candidate makes it clear that the offense is confined to conduct which has the tendency to undermine fair, open, and honest elections. In this case, it was clear the defendant's offer of money was done corruptly, as his objective was to divert votes from other candidates and manipulate the outcome of the election against them. Such conduct plainly tended to undermine a fair, open, and honest election. A third example relates not so much to a substantive corruption offense as to the protection of the integrity of the criminal investigation process. In HKSAR versus Liu Mon Hong, a 2019 case, the defendant was arrested and investigated by the ICAC for a corruption offense. The defendant, who was active in the political circle, wrote to both the commissioner of the ICAC and the then chief executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, protesting his innocence and asking them to stop the investigation. Otherwise, so he intimated, unpleasant political consequences would follow. He was convicted of attempting to pervert the course of justice. On appeal to the Court of Final Appeal, the defendant argued that his conduct had not been shown to have a tendency to pervert the course of justice. This was because the prosecution had not established that the chief executive and the commissioner could, by the lawful exercise of their legal powers, stop or interfere with the ICAC investigation. The court unanimously rejected the argument. In his position, the commissioner could, if he wanted to, directly or indirectly interfere with the investigation, if not terminate it prematurely. As for the chief executive, as head of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and the person to whom the commissioner was accountable, he was in a position to influence the commissioners and through the commissioner, his office's handling of the investigation, if not stop it altogether. Whether they had the legal powers to do so was beside the point. In the circumstances, the court held that the defendant was rightly convicted and dismissed his appeal accordingly. These examples illustrate that the courts in Hong Kong take corruption offences as well as the investigation and prosecution of these offences both seriously and with a broad view. Corruption in all these forms should be combated. Nonetheless, it is not possible to write all permutations of corruption into the law. Moreover, what makes corruption particularly insidious is that it may not always be a criminal offense. There may be more subtle and dangerous forms of corruption, such as influence peddling, by which one uses one's influence to obtain preferential treatment of favors in exchange for personal gain, abuses of discretion, which involve the misuse of one's authority in exchange for personal gain, and favoritism and nepotism, the favoring of someone connected to the person in a position of authority regardless of merit. Depending on the method, these forms of corruption may not always be caught by the scope of the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance, or indeed the scope of any offense. This brings me to the point that corruption is not a phenomenon that is easily measured and thus not easily detected or studied. As was noted by my predecessor at the last ICAC symposium, the insidious and secretive nature of corruption makes it extremely hard to investigate. For example, the Corruption Perceptions Index, which ranks countries on corruption, does so on the basis of perceived levels of public sector corruption. Corruption may be measured by counting criminal cases for corruption, but this measure assumes that all forms of corruption have been criminalized and are being caught. Information on corruption is thus derived from more subjective methods, such as survey studies like the Corruption Perceptions Index. The academic study of the economics of corruption can be traced back to the 1970s, and some economists have even argued that corruption may not be entirely bad, and there are potentially economic benefits to corruption. For example, so it is suggested, bribery may be used to make an overly bureaucratic system more efficient, motivating the bureaucrats to take action and essentially functioning as an unofficial tax. There are economies, so the argument goes, where cronyism and graft were taking place that nonetheless experienced economic booms, including Hong Kong in the 1960s and early 70s. This field of the so-called benefits of corruption is unfortunately an exceedingly short-term and narrow one. Whilst, for example, a bribe may perhaps clear some bureaucracy immediately, this practice of taking bribes to overcome bureaucracy certainly serves as a disincentive to make things more efficient. In fact, it will most probably create an incentive to make processes less efficient, to create more bribe-taking opportunities. In this way, corruption is not merely the product of a bad institution. It actually helps create bad institutions. Moreover, whilst corruption is perhaps most keenly felt in economic terms by the inefficiencies that it breeds, it may also lead to the distortion of markets through the manipulation of market mechanisms to establish unfair monopolies, allowing prices to be set high and offering no incentive to improve the quality of goods and services. Connected to the creation of inefficiency is the drag effect corruption has on the growth of economies. One particular aspect which is worth highlighting is the need for investment, both domestic and foreign, to drive economic growth. However, investors are likely to be discouraged by corruption from making investments, as they would prefer fair, transparent, and competitive markets in order to protect their capital. The prevention, detection, and prosecution of corruption is thus as much an economic issue as it is an ethical or legal issue. But perhaps much more fundamentally, regardless of what short-term economic benefits, if any, corruption might bring, the harm it does to the rule of law is beyond measure. For corruption is diametrically opposed to the rule of law in a society. Whereas the rule of law requires that all persons and institutions are governed by and accountable to the same rules and standards, and that nobody is above the law. Corruption is the misuse of power that leads to some not being subject to or held accountable under the same rules, thereby placing them above the law. Where corruption is allowed to flourish, the rule of law is necessarily compromised, and fundamental rights such as the right of equality before the law are not protected. Instead, power is misused, unfair monopolies are allowed to rise, bureaucracy intensifies, whilst transparency, accountability, and access to justice fail. Most critically, corruption erodes public faith in governments and institutions where the rule of law is built on public trust. Just as corruption may be hard to measure, the rule of law is intangible, largely built on the public belief in institutions such as the courts and government. Thus, even the appearance of corruption, never mind corruption on a micro scale, will lead to the erosion of the public's belief in the rule of law. Therefore, if for no other reasons than the upholding of the rule of law in a society, it is vital that corruption be subject to continuing vigilance and efforts to combat it at all levels and in all forms. In this context, perception is reality. Corruption is difficult to detect or measure, and the rule of law is an intangible, substantially based on belief, and most importantly, the perception of one precludes the perception of the other. Therefore, even if it may not be possible to write all permutations of corruption into the law, and even if not all forms of corruption may be criminal offenses, corruption should still be opposed, as its prevention inspires faith in the rule of law, and vice versa. Given the different forms of corruption, different scales of corruption, and the fact that corruption may occur in all sectors of society, it is critical for anti-corruption authorities such as the ICAC and other institutions represented by many of you who attend today's symposium to continue to expand their knowledge and expertise in order to effectively enforce the laws against corruption. This may be referred to as a compliance-based approach, which essentially involves making the cost of engaging in corruption so high that it simply is not worth risking. This is in line with most other forms of crime control through the use of penalties and punishments to prevent the criminal conduct by deterrence. Studies have shown that this approach of controlling corruption is dependent on the likelihood of detection. Sessions such as the one on law enforcement at this symposium are thus invaluable for the exchange of knowledge and experiences between different jurisdictions, particularly as we live in an age where money is easily moved electronically across borders and digital assets are accessible from different geographical locations across the world. By increasing expertise in corruption, anti-corruption authorities are better able to detect corruption and brings the full force of deterrence against it. In addition to criminal sanction, however, increasing public awareness and promoting participation in corruption prevention are also key to combating corruption. In this regard, the ICAC has been no less active than in any other aspect of their work, including their TV drama series, TV commercials, public posters, and anti-corruption materials for youth and minorities to ensure that the most vulnerable sectors of the community are included and informed about combating corruption. In order to ensure that anti-corruption values are embedded in society, public awareness about corruption must continue to be raised and in turn supported by public education about all the negatives that corruption brings. A society that is intolerant of corruption is one in which not only is the rule of law strong, but is also valued. Thus, a significant component of this symposium are the sessions on community engagement and youth perspective. These are also perhaps the most difficult levels at which to engage the battle against corruption, but are also arguably the most important in order to ensure that anti-corruption values are embedded in society itself. I'm sure that you are all looking forward to the contributions of the speakers on all of these topics over the course of this symposium, which, given its richness, promises to be very useful and successful. I take these opportunities to thank the ICAC for their tireless efforts against corruption and in organizing this symposium along with the International Association of Anti-Corruption Authorities, and to all the speakers for their forthcoming input. Thank you all for your time and attention to this most important topic, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the Honorable Chief Justice Chung, for your insightful sharing, highlighting the importance of rule of law and the critical issues in the fight against corruption. For our next keynote speaker, simultaneous interpretation for English is available on Channel 1. 各位嘉宾，今天我们非常荣幸邀请到下一位主讲嘉宾，中国共产党中央纪律检查委员会副书记、中华人民共和国国家监察委员会副主任傅奎先生。副书记毕业于北京师范大学哲学专业，在1986年，副书记进入中央纪委监察部工作，从事反腐败工作已经将近40年。在2014年，副书记获任命为国家预防腐败局副局长兼中央纪委国际合作局局长，并在2015年任河南省委常委及省纪委书记。 自2021年至今，副书记获任命为中央纪委副书记及国家监委副主任，肩负着惩贪肃纪的重要职责，拥有丰富的反腐败实践经验。现在，让我们用最热烈的掌声欢迎副书记。
尊敬的胡一鸣专员，尊敬的瓦利女士，尊敬的各位来宾，女士们、先生们，大家上午好。我很高兴出席香港廉政公署第8届国际会议。今年是联署成立50周年，我仅代表中共中央纪委、中国国家监委对联署50年来取得的成就表示热烈祝贺，对联署为本次会议做出的努力表示衷心的感谢。联署自成立以来，始终以肃贪倡廉为目标，坚持执法、预防、教育3管齐下，在推进香港廉洁建设上发挥了重要的作用。同时，联署充分利用香港背靠祖国、连同世界的优势，与不同国家和地区的反腐败机构相合作，成立国际廉政学院，搭建研究交流的平台，取得了丰硕的成果。我们相信，在李家超行政长官的领导下，在胡一鸣专员的带领下，联署坚持反贪不停步，必将为香港的廉洁建设做出更大的贡献。女士们、先生们，中共18大以来，在习近平总书记的坚强领导下，我们坚持无禁区全覆盖零容忍，打虎拍蝇猎狐多管齐下，不敢腐、不能腐、不想腐，一体推进，反腐败斗争取得压倒性胜利并全面巩固，成功地走出了一条依靠制度优势、政治优势的中国特色反腐败之路，主要有以下内容：一是坚持党中央对反腐败工作的集中统一领导，健全完善党和国家的监督体系。最高领导人的决心是反腐败斗争能否取得成功的关键。习近平总书记作为党和国家最高领导人，以顽强的意志品质，亲自领导了史无前例的反腐败斗争，坚定不移把反腐败斗争进行到底，把党的自我革命进行到底。这是我们反腐败取得成效的根本保证。我们推进国家监察体制改革，成立各级监察委员会，制定监察法等反腐败的法律法规，推动党内监督、国家监察与司法监督、审计监督、财会监督、群众监督等相互协调，强化对权力的监督的全覆盖有效性，形成了反腐败斗争的强大合力。第二是坚持人民至上，坚决整治损害群众利益的腐败问题和不正之风。中国共产党和中国政府始终坚持把人民的利益放在心中的最高位置，人民群众反对什么、痛恨什么，我们就坚决地防范和纠正什么。我们围绕教育、医疗、生态环境、安全生产、食品安全、执法、司法等群众关心的领域开展监察，整治扶贫领域的突出问题，惩治黑恶势力的保护伞，切实增强人民群众的获得感、幸福感和安全感。民意调查显示，97.4%的中国群众对反腐败工作的成效表示满意。第三呢，是坚持严的基调，强化纪律建设和作风建设。纪律是管党治党的戒尺，我们坚持把纪律挺在前面。中共18大以来3次修订《中国共产党纪律处分条例》，形成了覆盖党员干部行为规范的6项纪律，督促党员干部把遵规守纪刻印在心上，自觉地规范自己的行为。中央领导同志带头落实8项规定精神，以身作则，以上率下， 推动党风政风持续好转，8项规定改变中国，党风政风焕然一新。4是坚持系统施治，一体推进，不敢腐、不能腐、不想腐。我们坚持对腐败零容忍，有贪必树，有腐必惩。是行使公权力的人敬畏纪法，不越底线，坚持完善全面从严治党的制度规范体系，深化改革，铲除滋生腐败的土壤和条件，把权力关进制度的笼子里，加强理想信念教育，营造崇尚廉洁，抵制腐败的良好风尚。3步一体推进同时发力、同向发力、综合发力，达到标本兼治、系统治理的效果。5是坚持合作共赢，持续地深化反腐败国际合作。我们全面履行联合国反腐败公约的义务，提出反腐败国际合作的4项主张，推动通过亚太经合组织北京反腐败宣言、20国集团反腐败追逃追偿高级原则、金砖国家拒绝腐败避风港倡议，推进“一带一路”联结建设，推出“一带一路”企业联结合规的评价体系，与80多个国家缔结170余项司法协助类的条约，与各国携手打击腐败，以反腐败国际合作推动构建人类命运的共同体。女士们、先生们，腐败是人类社会的共同敌人，惩治腐败需要国际社会携手同心，共同应对。中方愿与各方一道，深化全球反腐败治理，开拓廉洁世界新道路。1是凝聚政治共识，对腐败问题秉持零容忍态度，打造零漏洞制度，开启零障碍合作，积极推进追逃追赃和跨国商业贿赂的治理合作，继续发挥联合国反腐败公约在反腐败国际合作中的主渠道作用，支持联合国全球反腐败执法合作网络建设，反对以任何借口为腐败分子和腐败资产提供避风港。中方将于今年9月在北京举办2024年联合国全球反腐败执法合作的网络会议，我们欢迎各国各地区的同仁同行来参加这次会议。2是深化务实合作，坚持合作共赢理念，广泛缔结引渡刑事司法协助条约，构筑更加紧密高效的司法执法的合作网络，简化刑事司法协助和跨境资产的追缴程序，消除合作障碍，让腐败分子无所遁形。今年8月，中方将与秘鲁联合举办亚太经合组织拒绝腐败避风港、加强反腐败国际刑事司法协助的研讨会，与亚太经合组织成员共同探讨加强如何提高反腐败司法执法合作的质效。3是加强交流互鉴，坚持人类命运共同体理念，推动建立平等相待、尊重差异、交流互鉴、共同进步的反腐败合作伙伴关系，深入开展反腐败信息交流和经验的分享。近年来，中方会同联合国毒罪办等国际组织，累计为50多个国家的700余名官员和400多家企业提供反腐败的教育培训。中方将继续举办“一带一路”合作伙伴的反腐败研修班，在5年内为广大合作伙伴培训300人次以上。我们愿与大力支持新成立的香港联属的国际廉政学院，积极开展反腐败交流培训，与世界各国分享反腐败经验，实现共同发展。最后再次感谢大家的聆听，谢谢大家。
感谢副书记非常具有启发性的演说，跟我们分享 social affairs in the League of Arab States. In addition, she led leadership positions in various organizations, including Managing Director of the Social Fund for Development and Assistant Resident Representative for Poverty Reduction at the UN Development Program. Ms. Wali is truly a remarkable leader at the international stage, and it is our pleasure today to invite her to share her insight on the topic Crossroads, Threats and Opportunities on the Path to Ending Corruption. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Wali.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Commissioner Wu, Your Excellency, Mr. Fuquay, distinguished speakers, excellencies, guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to address you at this landmark symposium of the Independent Commission Against Corruption of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of China. I want to start to congratulate the ICAC on its Golden Jubilee. Happy anniversary. This year we mark 5 decades of ICAC's transformative journey. A journey that has enabled Hong Kong's rise to become an economic powerhouse that boasts remarkable anti-corruption success stories. And we have just heard from Chief Justice about its role in details. ICAC was started as a way to address organized crime and corruption, and many other governments learned important lessons from that experience. You can look back on the past 50 years with great pride. I also want to thank ICAC as well as the International Association of Anti-Corruption Authorities, IACA, for hosting this symposium. I applaud your dedication to multilateralism and your efforts to bring together 60 jurisdictions and more than 100 agencies from different regions of the world around the UN Convention Against Corruption. Excellencies, the theme of this symposium is a very timely one, charting a new path towards combating corruption. In this era of uncertainty, as crises rage and threats simmer, we need to rethink and revitalize anti-corruption efforts. And to chart a new path, we first need to comprehend and appreciate the impact of corruption today. It is not an exaggeration to say that corruption underpins many of the biggest challenges facing humanity today. As we struggle to achieve Agenda 2030, corruption obstructs all of the sustainable development goals. As poverty and inequality rise worldwide, corruption is draining development resources and impacting the most vulnerable groups disproportionately, including women, children, and refugees. As conflict engulfs the world and violence spreads, corruption is eroding the rule of law as well as peace, security, and human rights. As trust deteriorates and polarization takes hold, corruption is threatening political and democratic processes, a threat that is especially relevant this year, with elections set to take place in at least 64 countries globally. And as our planet warms and our environment suffers, corruption is allowing private interests to exploit nature and hampering the global response. But then we speak of corruption and its impact. It's important to go beyond general statements. It is important to contextualize what we are speaking about and to look at concrete examples. And I want to highlight a few examples where the corrosive effect of corruption can be particularly damaging and where anti-corruption action is paramount. In large investment projects, corruption in both the public and private sectors can inflate costs, stifle competition, and undermine results. The most conservative estimates suggest that procurement contracts lose around 8% of their value to corruption, a global total of around $880 billion. This is more than 5 times the sum of development aid disbursed in 2019. And it highlights the need to improve procurement practices, especially in developing countries. I was very happy to participate in China's Clean Silk Road Forum last year, where we discussed the importance of protecting the $1 trillion Belt and Road Initiative from corruption. In the health sector, Corruption creates dangerous risks, from medical ghost workers, distorted procurement systems, to infiltration of falsified medicines into markets, to theft or unfair distribution of vaccines. We saw many of these risks clearly during the COVID-19 pandemic, underlining the need for robust oversight. The World Health Organization estimates that around $500 billion per year in public health spending is lost to corruption. This is an amount higher than the projected cost of achieving universal health care by 2030. Recovering the funds lost to corruption in health spending could put that goal within reach. In sports, the influx of huge sums of money at the top level has changed the game and the risks involved. The global sports market is valued by some estimates at more than $480 billion. And we are seeing new levels of competition manipulation and infiltration of organized crime, requiring stronger frameworks for prevention, detection, investigation, and sanctioning. And last but certainly not least, corruption in criminal justice systems can be catastrophic. It impedes access to justice, spreads impunity, and undermines people's trust in governments and the rule of law. And it creates an environment where there is motive and means for illicit activity to thrive. This brings me to what is perhaps the most urgent dimension of corruption that I want to highlight today, the avenues it creates for organized crime. The dangers posed by transnational organized crime are growing across the globe. The UN General Assembly recognized this fact earlier this year when it designated November 15 as the International Day for the Fight Against Transnational Organized Crime, as did the Security Council when it held a session on this topic in December of last year. And corruption provides much of the infrastructure that sustains organized crime, from the borders of Southeast Asia and Latin America to the ports of Western Europe and West Africa. Corruption enables drugs and other trafficked goods to escape detection. From the Mekong to the Sahel to the Amazon, corruption enables crime like illegal logging, illegal mining, and wildlife trafficking. And across all illicit markets, corruption props up the criminal financial networks that protect and conceal the proceeds of crime. We see a stark example of this in the Golden Triangle region, where gaps of regulation and enforcement have allowed illegal casinos and cryptocurrency exchanges to act as money laundering centers for organized crime. We cannot make headway against organized crime without fighting corruption. Excellencies, corruption challenges are more global and more urgent than ever. So, as the theme of this symposium asks, how can we chart a new path forward to fight corruption? I want to underline 4 key priorities that can help pave a new path for anti-corruption efforts, and that the UN Office on Drugs and Crime considers essential in our work going forward. The first priority is to future-proof responses to corruption by leveraging the positive role of technology and unleashing the potential of youth. New technologies are giving rise to corruption risks and regulation gaps, but they also hold huge promise in potential uses for good. Digitization boosts transparency, and digital platforms provide simple ways to report corruption, while data mining and artificial intelligence can detect patterns of collusion and provide more accurate assessment of risks. We need to explore how we can maximize benefit from these tools, and we need to work with young people on this and other anti-corruption endeavors, channeling their passion, optimism, and innovation towards creating a renewed culture of integrity. At UNODC, we saw what youth can bring to the table when we organized our Coding for Integrity hackathons, where youth came together to develop groundbreaking anti-corruption solutions. And we continue to see it every day through the work of our GRACE initiative, which engages young people on anti-corruption work and helps educate the next generation of integrity leaders. That is why UNODC was proud to collaborate with ICAC and IACA to develop a policy guide for national anti-corruption authorities on meaningful youth engagement in anti-corruption work. We were also happy to help ICAC identify young panelists for this symposium, including from UNODC's Youth-Led Integrity Advisory Board, to make sure young voices are represented at this important event. The second priority is to unlock the full potential of international and regional anti-corruption frameworks and to streamline cross-border cooperation. The UN Convention Against Corruption, the UNCAC, provides a globally agreed framework against corruption with near universal adherence, and last year we celebrated 20 years of UNCAC and the progress it embodies. But there is still plenty of room for improvement in its implementation. In the short term, we must facilitate direct and informal cooperation between anti-corruption authorities, and in this regard, the establishment of the GlobeE network has been a milestone step. GlobeE counts 203 authorities from 113 countries among its members, offering law enforcement authorities easy access to contact points in other countries to exchange experiences and information on anti-corruption cases. ICAC has been an active member and supportive partner of GlobeE, and I encourage other anti-corruption entities to follow in the same footsteps. In long term, we need to identify and address implementation challenges, and the UNCAC's review mechanism has been at the core of this effort. Supported by UNODC's 177 state parties have completed their peer reviews, and many of them have undertaken domestic reforms and stepped to strengthen laws and institutions. The review process has already reflected a shared commitment to strengthen international cooperation, including extradition, mutual legal assistance, and law enforcement cooperation. And it has identified the need for more resources to build capacities and more efforts to build trust. The next UNCAC Conference of State Parties in 2025 will be an opportunity to take stock of the lessons learned from the current phase of the review mechanism. The third priority I want to talk about is the need to address gaps in capacities through partnerships. The global response to corruption is only as strong as its weakest link. Providing training and sharing best practices is essential, and here I want to congratulate the ICAC on its newly established International Academy Against Corruption, and we stand ready to support the Academy's technical assistance work. Our office has extensive experience providing technical assistance on the ground, including through our 5 regional anti-corruption hubs, and we already have a good track record of working with ICAC. Our new Memorandum of Understanding, signed today, can help us expand that cooperation, providing a blueprint for similar collaboration. Beyond governments and international organizations, we also need to bolster partnerships with the private sector, civil society, and academia, who have indispensable roles in the fight against corruption. And the fourth and final priority I want to highlight is the need to better understand corruption and its trends through robust measurement, research, and analysis. Measuring corruption can foster transparency and accountability of public institutions, attract investors, and raise awareness, but it is a complex and often politicized task. There are many inaccurate, deceptive, and misunderstood numbers and estimates floating around when it comes to corruption. Data is critical to acquire an accurate picture of the challenges and inform responses. That is why last year UNODC developed a statistical framework to support states in building national systems to measure corruption, using a comprehensive and context-specific approach. We also continue to produce dedicated thematic reports that shed light on specific dimensions of corruption, including corruption in particular sectors like sports, forestry, and fisheries, as well as the gender dimension of corruption. I invite you to make use of these tools and to support our efforts to better understand corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, corruption is undermining everything we fight for and empowering everything we fight against. And it is finding new opportunities to entrench itself in the cracks between countries and jurisdiction as the gaps of trust grow wider. As we stand at this historic crossroads of challenges and opportunities, we need to seize every chance to close those gaps and to innovate in the face of growing corruption challenges together. In September, the UN member states will convene at the Summit of the Future to reinvigorate multilateralism and rally around shared solutions to global problems. It will be a valuable chance to renew international commitment to integrity, accountability, and transparency, as well as to collective action against corruption. The Chinese astrologer Shibu posited that harmony begets new things. By uniting around the UNCAC And working in harmony, we can chart a new path to fight corruption, and we can walk that path together. Thank you.
Thank you, Her Excellency Ms. Wali, for your invaluable experience in tackling corruption. Our next keynote speaker is the Honorable Mr. Horace Kwan, Acting Secretary for Justice of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China. Before joining the Department of Justice, Mr. Cheung had a successful career as a solicitor in the private practice with qualifications in civil law. He also holds numerous advisory and board positions spanning the areas of government, housing, and legal profession. In particular, he previously served as a non-official member of the Executive Council as well as a member of the Legislative Council of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. Today, Mr. Cheung will impart insight drawn from his rich experience in both the public and private sectors under the topic, Charting a New Path to Combat Corruption, which echoes with our theme of the symposium. The Honorable Mr. Cheung, please.
Commissioner Wu, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor today to deliver a keynote address in this symposium alongside with all the distinguished speakers. In the following time, I would like to highlight the work of the Department of Justice, DOJ, in combating corruption by upholding rule of law at both local and international levels. The notion of rule of law is widely believed to be important for the development of the society. Why is it so? Let us look at the United Nations say. Goal 16 of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations calls for action to, among others, promote the rule of law at the national and international levels and ensure equal access to justice for all, and substantially reduce corruption and bribery in all their forms. It's no exaggeration to say that the rule of law based on our common law system is one of the backdrops of the Hong Kong's success and prosperity. As reflected from various international indices, Hong Kong's rule of law has improved substantially since 1997. Our percentile rank for rule of law in the World Bank's worldwide governance indicators has increased from below 70 points in 1996 to around 88 in 2023, ranking the third in Asia. In the 2023 World Justice Project Rule of Law Index, Hong Kong ranked the 6th in East Asia and the Pacific and attains the 23rd out of 142 countries and jurisdictions, ahead of quite a few Western countries. Credit to the excellent work of the ICAC, Hong Kong is also regarded as one of the least corrupt places under the Corruption Perception Index 2023 issued by the Transparency International. Hong Kong has consistently remained top 20 since the launch of the index, demonstrating that Hong Kong's anti-corruption efforts by the ICAC have been widely recognized. Hong Kong's success in upholding the rule of law is built on our strong legal infrastructure. It's constitutionally guaranteed that judicial power shall be exercised independently by the court, free from any interference. Judges are appointed solely on the basis of their judicial and professional qualities by the chief executives on the recommendation of an independent commission, with their tenure secured under the Basic Law. One remarkable feature of Hong Kong's judicial system is that our final appellate court may invite eminent foreign judges to sit as non-permanent judges. Including the recently recommended appointment, there will be an increase from 9 to 10 foreign non-permanent judges from the United Kingdom, Australia, and Canada, who are highly regarded in their own jurisdictions and bring with them international judicial experience that enrich Hong Kong's jurisprudence. The Basic Law also guarantees that everyone, regardless of status, profession, or political belief, shall be equal before the law. All prosecutorial decisions shall be made by DOJ independently, free from any interference based on the law, the evidence, and the published prosecution code. The right to fair trial is guaranteed in the Basic Law. Court hearings are open to the public. Judicial decisions with detailed reasons are available online. We also ensure equal access to justice. In Hong Kong, there is no ceiling on legal aid expenditure covering a wide range of civil and criminal matters. Once the statutory means and merits are satisfied, legal aid funding will be made available. With a robust infrastructure in place, we need human talent to make it work effectively. Hong Kong is a home to a deep pool of legal profession comprising solicitors and barristers who are self-regulated respectively by the Law Society and the Bar Association of Hong Kong. We have also attracted a substantial number of overseas lawyers to provide professional services in Hong Kong. These local and overseas legal professionals are multilingual and highly regarded internationally in terms of their expertise and strong integrity. Fully recognizing its importance, the DOJ spared no effort in the promotion of rule of law. We launched the Rule of Law Train the Leaders program in November last year, which aims at enhancing the trainees' ability and effectiveness in disseminating public messages on the rule of law in their roles and capacities in the community. After the successful conclusion of its Phase 1 last year, we are actively planning to launch the second phase in Q3 this year. DOJ has also actively collaborated with other stakeholders, including the Law Society and the Bar Association, in promoting rule of law to different sectors of the community. For example, we have put in place interactive drama performance on rule of law for primary schools. Speaking of stakeholders, we are most grateful for ICAC's dedicated efforts on public education, adopting an ethics for all approaches to devise preventive education programs for different sectors of the community. For example, the I-Teen Leadership Program and ICAC Ambassadors Program for senior secondary and tertiary students. In the past years, DOJ helped organizing interesting rule of law journeys for the I-Teen leaders and ICAC ambassadors. And this year, we are planning to send our rule of law education leaders to visit ICAC so as to further deepen our trainees' understanding of the important role of ICAC in upholding the rule of law. I hope that through these exchanges, we would create synergy in our joint efforts on the promotion of rule of law. Furthermore, the DOJ has set up an internal working group responsible for taking forward the establishment of the Hong Kong International Legal Talent Training Academy. As mentioned in the Chief Executive's 2023 policy address, this year, DOJ will set up a dedicated office and an expert group to take forward the establishment of the academy. Capitalizing on the Hong Kong strength under the rule of law, bilingual common law system, and international status, the academy will plan, organize, and launch training programs focusing on legal practices and procedures based on DOJ's existing training and capacity building programs, further consolidating Hong Kong's position as an international legal and dispute resolution services center in the Asia-Pacific region. In developing Hong Kong as a national capacity building center for foreign related rule of law personnel, we are better safeguarding national sovereignty, security, and development interests. For other local measures, the constitutional guarantee of prosecutorial independence in Hong Kong under the Basic Law is a linchpin of our rule of law. Corruption undermines social fairness and justice, hinders economic cooperation and development, as well as affects government's credibility and the rule of law. As the Court of Appeal forewarned us in the case of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region versus Chen Xi-ting and another, if corruption was not destroyed, it would destroy society. It's against this background that the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance was enacted and the Independent Commission Against Corruption, the ICAC, was established. Combating corruption and upholding the rule of law are essential for a fair and just society. This involves enforcing strict regulations, promoting transparency, empowering independent judicial systems, and fostering a culture of accountability among both citizens and public officers. The setting up of the ICAC in Hong Kong, equipped with a comprehensive regime of anti-corruption offences and investigatory powers, signify our determination to hit hard at the root of the social evil of corruption. Technology has enabled crime today to transcend jurisdictional boundaries in charting a new path to combat corruption. Closer cross-jurisdictional cooperation between law enforcement and prosecutorial agencies is more vital than ever. Joint collaborative efforts comprises the sharing of information among countries to investigate and prosecute cross-border corruption cases. The importance of experience sharing session cannot be overlooked. The 11th IAP Asia and Pacific Regional Conference of the International Association of Prosecutors is an example of our endeavor in global cooperation initiative. The conference will be hosted by the Prosecutions Division of our department in November this year in this Convention and Exhibition Center. The event will be attended by around 200 prosecutors, including the Attorney General and heads of the prosecutorial agencies from different jurisdictions in the Asia-Pacific region and across the globe. The conference, with the theme of effective prosecution services in the technological age, will focus on combating crime in the technological age and the use of technology in the criminal justice system. It's certain that much insight and perspective can be gained through such a meaningful forum where legal knowledge and experience is shared on a global level. Hong Kong is not doing all this alone. The Hong Kong Special Administrative Region has always been committed to playing a proactive role in international cooperation in law enforcement. We have an ongoing initiative to establish and expand legal cooperation with other jurisdictions across the globe. Over the years, we have regularly and successfully rendered international cooperation and legal assistance in criminal matters to many other jurisdictions pursuant to applicable arrangements and multilateral conventions, including the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, which has been applied to Hong Kong since 2006. Domestically, the Fugitive Offender Corruption Order, the Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters Corruption Order, the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance, and the Organized and Serious Crime Ordinance contain detailed provisions covering the creation, investigation, and prosecution of relevant offenses of bribery, corruption, and money laundering, and the arrangements on surrender of fugitive offenders and mutual legal assistance in criminal matters, including provision and obtaining of evidence, as well as restraining, confiscating, and repatriation of proceeds of crime. The Hong Kong Special Administrative Region has always maintained a high standard in processing requests for mutual legal assistance, the quality of which has been fully recognized and highly regarded worldwide, such as in the Mutual Evaluation Report published by the Financial Action Task Force in 2019. Hong Kong has fulfilled its important role in the fight against cross-border crimes. In particular, Hong Kong has been fully supportive of the work of the UNODC. Legal experts from DOJ have taken an active part as members of the delegation of the People's Republic of China in participating in a wide range of UNODC-related events, including the Conference of the States Parties to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, the Implementation Review Group, the Open-Ended Intergovernmental Working Group on Asset Recovery, and the Open-Ended Intergovernmental Expert Meeting to enhance international cooperation. In the last decade, the DOJ has processed over 1,000 mutual legal assistance requests and more than 30 surrounding cases that concern offenses covered by the UNCAC. In the same period, over 270 million Hong Kong dollars of process of crime have been restrained, of which over 170 million Hong Kong dollars was ordered by the court to be confiscated. There are many successful cases of sharing of confiscated assets with other jurisdictions. Moreover, I'm also pleased to share with you the good news that China, the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, and Macau Special Administrative Region have recently been admitted as full members of the Southeast Asia Justice Network, CJUST. This network aims to promote international cooperation and intelligence sharing in the combat against all forms of serious and organized crimes. The Hong Kong Special Administrative Region's participation in CJUST will complement conventional formal legal cooperation among member jurisdictions and enable us to further consolidate our effectiveness in international law enforcement cooperation and to cope with new challenges in the combat against cross-border crimes. Last but not least, I wish to express my best wishes to the success of this symposium, and I'm sure that the insights shared during these 3 days will go beyond the event so that we could continue to fight against corruption with confidence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the Honorable Mr. Chang. Last but not least, it is our pleasure to introduce Mr. Peter Clement, Deputy European Chief Prosecutor of the European Public Prosecutor's Office. Serving as a prosecutor in the Czech Republic since the year 2000, Mr. Clement brings experience in criminal prosecution, specializing in cybercrime, terrorism financing, and economic crimes. He also holds leadership positions at the international level. He ran the National Network of Cybercrime Prosecutors and served as the General Coordinator of Criminal Justice Project at the European Judicial Training Network. He has also taken on key roles at Eurojust and other missions in North Kosovo and Albania. Recently, he served as the Deputy European Chief Prosecutor at the newly established European Public Prosecutor's Office, where he has helped build the institution since its founding. This morning, Mr. Clement is going to address the topic, a new supranational actor in the fight against corruption. Now please join me in welcoming Mr. Clement.
Dear distinguished and honorable guests, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Peter Clement, and I'm the Deputy Chief European Prosecutor representing the European Public Prosecutor's Office, which is an independent prosecution office reaching over soon 24 jurisdictions. We are responsible for investigating and bringing to judgment crimes affecting the budget of the European Union, including corruption. In my opinion, our office is a unique body in the field of criminal law, since for the first time in the history, maybe apart from the international criminal tribunals, the right to prosecute was given to a supranational body. Her Excellency, Madame Wali, indicated that we shall go into concrete cases, and I will. We have started our operations about 3 years ago, just 3 years ago. However, after 6 months of operations, we were thrown into the largest case of its kind in Europe, a case which we nicknamed Operation Admiral. In this case, a criminal activity of 5 organized crime groups was spread over more than 35 jurisdictions of all continents, and the damage they caused to state budgets amounted to 2.2 billion of euro. The investigation began in Portugal. We received information from a vigilant tax officer that a company which had income of nearly 300 million euro in just 1 year, employed only 1 person. That's why we started the investigation, and after about 18 months, we found out that 9,000 different companies and 600 individuals were involved in the large carousel VAT fraud, massive money laundering, bribery, and other related crime. With this operation, we discovered a new continent of crime. Some suspects were setting up companies, others were laundering the proceeds of the crime, some were providing legal advice, others were bribing bank officials and other public officials in order to avoid reporting suspicious transactions to financial intelligence units. Large organized criminal groups do not focus on one type of crime. They prefer to diversify their activities, and they behave like business corporations. They consider criteria such as benefit, risk, costs, and demand. In this respect, we can speak about transnational criminal enterprises. Long-standing and well-established mafia-type groups continue in their traditional activities, such as drug trafficking and racketeering. But several years ago, they entered into the business of public procurement fraud and VAT fraud, and nowadays they are in control of this type of crime. They often choose jurisdictions for their activities on the basis of weaknesses in laws, capability of the law enforcement to detect, the level of punishment, and options for corruption. Because of complexity of cross-border fraud, the criminals have to cooperate with networks of lawyers, bankers, companies, but also public officials who are willing to assist and who become step by step embedded in the criminal organization. These groups operate globally. They are always equipped with the latest high-end technology, and they even created their own Hawala-style banking system. So their activities may be invisible for a single investigator. In Operation Admiral we were successful, and the action days have taken place in 21 states. There were 312 house searches, 24 arrests, and the total value of the initial seized property amounted to 67 million euro. The case is pending between the court of Portugal, but many other indictments will follow. The operation had a huge impact on activities of various organized crime groups across Europe and beyond. And we believe that without the EPPO, the case would not be investigated in such a large scope. The European Public Prosecutor's Office is not a network. We are not a coordinator. We are one single prosecution office with executive competence. We rapidly exchange information and evidence across borders without formal requests, and we have access to all national and to dozens of European Union databases. As such, we can see the whole transnational picture of crime. At the end of 2023, we had a total of 1,900 active investigations. Nowadays, we have over 2,000 of them, with an overall estimated damage of 19.2 billion euro. 545 of them had a cross-border dimension. I shall say that the number of cases is growing. In comparison with the year 2022, the caseload rose for 70%. We are an office with headquarters in Luxembourg, with representatives from each participating country. There are permanent teams specialized in investigating tax fraud, corruption, fraud in public tenders, and we have recently appointed a senior coordinator for investigating organized crime. There are currently 23 participating member states in the EPPO. Poland has joined recently, but we expect also Sweden to join by the end of this year. So by the end of 2024, we will comprise 24 jurisdictions. Today, there are 150 European delegated prosecutors operating in the member states. They bring cases before national courts. It is important to emphasize that European prosecutors keep their national powers and can exercise them in daily operations, including requesting mutual legal assistance. Our material competence is relating to all crimes affecting the budget of the European Union. We focus on serious organized crime, including high-level corruption, but we have many cases relating to manipulating with public tenders, abuse of office, and tax fraud. There are also certain thresholds for exercising of our competence. We usually do not investigate cases with the damage under 100,000 euro, and for the tax fraud cases the threshold is 10 million euro. We also focus on cases with the cross-border dimension. Our territorial competence is derived from the jurisdictions of the member states. If the crime takes place in the third country, the EPPO can investigate if the damage is caused to EU budget represented by an EU institution located in Belgium or Luxembourg. Finally, we can also investigate offences committed anywhere if they were committed by an official of the European Union and they affect the European Union budget. Large investigations led us to countries all over the world. And we need to cooperate with all the law enforcement, not just with some. We work together with Europol, with the European Anti-Fraud Office, OLAF, and we are members or observers in a number of important international organizations or networks, including the OECD Working Group on Bribery or the European Partners Against Corruption. We can cooperate with our partners on the basis of the UN Convention Against Corruption, the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, conventions of the Council of Europe, or even reciprocity. Some countries found legal obstacles to cooperate with the EPPO, but they did accept cooperation on the basis of national powers of the European prosecutors and via diplomatic channels. Other countries made changes in their national law in order to be able to cooperate with the EPPO, for example, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, or Ireland. The EPPO can be a gateway to cooperation with the European Union if the criminal case is concerning more member states and the EPPO is competent. For our international partners, for you, it may be easier to cooperate with one partner instead of 24. EPPO can offer its background and staff in Luxembourg for operational meetings, for analysis in joint investigations, which in future may be as successful as was the Operation Admiral. Corruption is a bypass of the established system, but it's also a way of thinking. It may bring advantages for a few individuals, but devastate economic competition and public trust to governments. Investigating global cases requires using high-end technology, different planning, faster networking, but also overcoming the old-fashioned ways of cross-border cooperation. Governments and the law enforcement has to think different in order to find global solutions to global criminal threats. Finally, I want to thank the organizers of this symposium for giving such attention to younger generation, to their integrity, and to understanding that crime and corruption do not lead to prosperity. The younger generation, they deserve a fair and safe society. So let me address the final quote to the young people. We must not be afraid of dreaming the seemingly impossible if we want the seemingly impossible to become a reality. I thank you for your attention and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clement, for your insights. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the morning section. You may leave your headset on your seat before you leave the auditorium. For those who have enrolled to a half or full program, please proceed to the Bohemia room on the ground floor for lunch. Our staff will also direct you there. The first plenary session will be held at this auditorium after lunch at 1:45 under the topic, Sustainable International Cooperation for a Shared Future. See you later.